Welcome back to episode 18 of the 15,000 acre challenge on the Huron County, Michigan 16X map. It's a big day here on the mega farm because today officially marks the end of our massive year one fall harvest. This has been an absolutely incredible first season and by far the biggest and most profitable harvest I've ever tackled in Farming Simulator 25. Over the course of this first fall, we've managed to harvest over 2,400 acres of cash crops. Everything from oats to soybeans and now, wrapping things up with our 1,200 acre corn harvest. It's been nonstop work all season long, but we're finally closing in on that finish line, and I can't wait to see the final numbers once it's all said and done. We'll start off the day by checking in on our harvesting fleet as they knock out the last few passes of corn on our final field. Back at the farm, our mega silo complex is already packed full to the brim. And that means it's time to make use of the temporary bin site I built last episode to handle the overflow. This setup has been a lifesaver. Between the augers, conveyors, and all the hauling we've been doing with Autodrive, it's been running surprisingly well. The only catch is those augers. They've got a habit of sliding around when the trucks start unloading, so I'll need to keep an eye on things and make sure the setup keeps running smoothly as we finish up this harvest. Now that we're nearing the end of our first fall harvest, it's time to start thinking ahead, because selling season is just around the corner. Out of all the crops we've harvested this year, corn is going to be our biggest moneymaker by far. By the time we're done, we'll have well over 8 million liters of corn in storage, and that should translate into a massive payday once prices hit their peak this winter. Before we can sell, though, there's one more big job ahead of us. We need to dry all of this corn. Drying it will give us a much higher profit margin, but it's going to take a lot of time, fuel, and careful management to get it done before January. So today, I'll be purchasing a couple propane trailers and making some runs into town to pick up propane and haul it back to the mega farm. We'll get the grain dryer refueled and fired up, and then begin the long process of drying every bit of corn we've harvested so far. While the dryer's running, I'll also need to start hauling corn from the temporary bin site back to the main silo complex. It's going to take several truckloads to move it all, and we'll have to carefully coordinate everything with Autodrive to keep the system flowing efficiently. It's going to be a busy day of logistics, hauling, and dryer management. But if all goes well, we should have everything dried, stored, and ready to sell just in time for peak prices. Once the last loads are dried and the combines finish up the final field, we'll officially be wrapping up our first ever fall harvest on the 15,000 acre challenge. That means it'll be time to send our entire harvesting fleet back to the farm for a much needed deep clean and full service before parking everything away for the winter. It's hard to believe how far we've come in just one in-game year. From starting up this massive 16X operation to harvesting thousands of acres and filling up every bin on the farm. But there's still work left to do before we roll into year two, and I'm determined to finish strong. So let's fire up the engines one more time, get the trucks rolling, and see how much we can get done today. The first fall harvest on the 15,000 acre challenge is coming to an end, but the future of this mega farm is only just beginning. If you're looking forward to the 15,000 acre challenge, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.